Hi, my name is Ashley. I want to start doing book reviews. I really love books. I love talking about books. And I noticed that online a lot of the video book report videos are mostly about fiction. And I think nonfiction books are underread, and they're some of the most important books. And I believe that this is where journalism really is nowadays, real journalism. So I'm going to start with this book. There's no particular reason why I'm starting with this. It's just the one that I read, and this is where it begins. So I read Rise of the Warrior Cop: The Militarization of America's Police Forces by Radley Balko. Okay, so this book was really good, actually. But I'll start up with some essential information. So this guy, Radley Balko, he graduated from Indiana University, Bloomington, with a bachelor's degree in political science. He worked as a senior writer and investigator for the Washington Post. He was senior editor for Reason magazine. He used to work at the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank. He was a policy analyst there. He's also published in many different places. He's Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Playboy, Time magazine, all kinds of places. He's written a few books. So there was one that was published through the Cato Institute, which was a very similar topic. It was called Overkill, the Rise of Paramilitary Police Raids in America. Then he came out with this one, I believe 2018. He's also co-authored a third book called The Cadaver King and the Country Dentist, which I like this book so much I might even check that one out. And this book right here, this is for anyone. This is any concerned citizen, really. If you're noticing the erosion of, our civil liberties, if you're a student and you're researching crime or problems with the criminal justice system, if you're in law enforcement or are close to law enforcement in some way, it's bipartisan, so Republican, Democrat, whatever. This book is for everyone. So basically, you can kind of tell what it's about from the title. He's basically saying that this militaristic culture that just sort of pervades our law enforcement has been a major threat to our civil liberties, and that reform is badly needed. So what he does is he makes the case for that throughout the book. He's using all kinds of sources. He's diving into history. He's looking at case law. He's mentions studies done by criminologists, surveys, polls from media outlets, newspapers. He interviews members of law enforcement. There's also many examples of confrontations between police officers and particularly SWAT teams and civilians. And some of these incidents are pure nightmare fuel. It's probably the worst thing you expect to happen to you in the middle of the night. There's severe injury, death, property damage, just immense amounts of harm, and a lot of times, unfortunately, for no reason. And so anyway, basically he's looking at the insurgence of this problem spanning multiple decades. He organizes the book chronologically, so the first 3 chapters are more historical. The first one gets into ancient Rome, Old England, some other countries in Europe, and he describes the origin of some of our laws, how they handled policing back in the day, some problems they used to have with policing, how they would mitigate those problems, where we get the concept of the castle doctrine, a man's home is his castle, where that comes from. In the second chapter he goes into quartering, the origin of the Third Amendment, why people are so hostile to having soldiers being policed by soldiers and having soldiers be in their homes and taking up their resources. And then the third chapter is kind of like a history of just cops in America, like where that all came about, or how that all came about. So he, after those first three chapters, chapter 4, he starts to get into the decades. Beginning in the 1960s, chapter 5 is 1970s, chapter 6 is 1980s, and so on, into the 2000s, and then he finishes up the book with suggestions for reform, and sort of clarifies some of his arguments. It's a good ending to the book. So, pretty much what his main points are, like how this happened in the world, or in America, I mean. His main points are, number 1, the creation of the SWAT team. Number 2, the rise of the drug war. Number 3, basically the politicians. He talks a lot about campaign strategies. Each seceding politician wanting to appear tougher on crime than the last. It becomes like a trend. And each one of them trying to like sort of up the ante or outdo each other. So, and this is the beginning of where this, like, a lot of unconstitutional policy starts getting pushed through, especially no-knock raids. Like in the 1970s, no-knock raids, completely unconstitutional. And that gets into the fourth point, which is judges. Like, judges are supposed to be like experts on the Constitution, on law, what is legal, you know, and a lot of them fail. They really bad rulings on some very critical court cases that, I mean, they just seem like it seems like the Bill of Rights and thing is just lost on these people when they're supposed to be the guardians of that. And then I would say the fifth thing is probably just the lack of oversight at every single level that there could be. Like, I mean, it's like, of course, the politicians and the judges and everything, and you have the police chiefs, all the people on the hierarchy. You have like city officials, state officials, other government officials. Like, nobody really steps in and accepts responsibility or tries to solve any of the problem. It just keeps getting worse. So that's what the book is about. And the guy is just piling facts on top of facts. Like, he's just throwing everything at you, and it's really amazing, and it's really thought-provoking, and some of it's really shocking, actually. Like, he has some examples of, this guy, Joe McNamara. He has this committee meeting with some officials and stuff. Just try to remember where that was. It's so shockingly, it's just, man, I cannot remember where that chapter is, but this guy has this committee with all these city and state officials or whatever, people who should be in the know, who should be actually dealing with the problem, and he makes up a fake scenario and asks them, like, do you think this is a legitimate way to handle that? What would you do instead? And then he asks everybody on this panel, and every single person just kind of shirks their responsibilities. Well, whatever he decides, I wouldn't question it because it's not my thing. But I'll talk to the press about it and defend him. And it's really, really good. It's like maybe the third quarter of the book, fourth quarter of the book. That's one of my favorite parts in there. I also found like the sort of the introductory chapter is interesting too, like some of the history. I love learning about like old England and stuff. Like, that's just really cool, where we get the term sheriff from, how they handled policings, like tithings and stuff like that. So interesting. I would like to actually read more about that too. But anyway, this book is really good. Definitely if you're a libertarian, you're gonna love this guy. I think it's a big deal, and I think people should read about this, and I think more people should talk about it, and maybe we can implement some of the reforms that he mentions in the back of it. And if, maybe we can turn this thing around. So, yeah, I hope you check it out. Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Balko. Really good book. Take care.